And forever chemicals festering inside some of Vermont's schools. PCBs were a common component in building materials used prior to 1980. They have a lot of health risks like cancer and other illnesses.
To address the problem, the state launched the first in the nation pilot program for PCBs, and it's now about a year in, with dozens of schools tasked to clean up the chemicals. Channel 3's Melissa Cooney joins us live in Burlington this morning with an update. Melissa.
John and Alyssa, right now I'm standing in front of Burlington High School, and this is really where the PCB story began. In 2020, there were high levels of PCBs found at the high school, so they tore it down. They're building a new one, and right now students are learning just a few minutes away at the old Macy's building downtown Burlington. Now, since then, 103 out of 324 schools deemed necessary have been tested for PCBs. Today, we check in with two supervisory unions to see how they've navigated the PCB testing process and the impacts PCBs in the building may or may not have.
We're going to be dealing with PCBs for quite a long time yet to come.
In one Northeast Kingdom high school, around 100 classrooms were found to have high levels of PCBs. The 60-year-old building houses 750 students from 12 towns. To mitigate, Superintendent Elaine Collins says they're using air filters, and a contractor is looking to see where the PCBs are actually coming from.
It's going to take longer than just a summer, I think, to figure out where the PCBs are actually coming from. It's a bit of a guessing game. It's an educated guess because there are likely culprits in classrooms, but until they take out the materials that they think are off-putting PCBs and retest, it's really just a theory.
Until the source and the severity of the contamination is determined, it's unclear how extensive or expensive the cleanup would be. That's also the case at the district's elementary school in Brighton. Collins says the school shut down immediately last year when PC levels were found too high for the young students. Short-term mitigation strategies lowered the levels for the school year, allowing the older students back in the building. But the preschool remains off-site at a building being paid for by the state.
The plan for preschool is to set up a modular unit and have them come back, so at least they're on the land and they can access the lunchroom and specials and those kinds of things on site. But that also will take some time.
We have a lot of plans in place for a variety of scenarios if needed.
130 miles south in the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union, Superintendent Chris Sells says 6 of their 8 schools have been tested. He says 3 have mild levels, mostly in spaces like closets where students aren't present. Therefore, he says the process hasn't been disruptive yet.
We are currently working with one of our schools around mitigation and remediation as they're beginning to identify some potential causes or PCB causes, and that's typically like caulking around doors, around windows, which is not surprising since a lot of our schools were built prior to 1980.
They too are using air filters in Pulteney Elementary School, and Sells says over breaks, the contractors will be removing PCB culprits. Statewide, Agency of Natural Resources Patricia Coppolino says 40 of the 104 tested buildings exceed school action levels, which means they have to do some sort of mitigation, no matter how small.
The results vary based on the size of the school and the impacts that they have on the school, and it's not always concentration driven. It's how the school can manage what the impacts are, and it's a big impact on some small schools and some supervisory unions that have a lot of schools within their supervisory unions.
When action levels are detected, schools have the choice to begin mitigation within 6 weeks or vacate the space. Initially, the state was planning on paying 80% of the mitigation and requiring the schools to fund the other 20%. But at the end of the legislative session, it was decided the state would reimburse the cost, with $13.5 million budgeted towards remediation. With that comes uncertainty of the future.
It's hard to actually estimate what that total cost is because we don't know what the total universe of potential impacts are to the schools. And for some of them, we don't have costs yet to look at what those cleanup costs might be.
North Country High School could conceivably go through all of that money just itself, and I know that there are lots of other schools that are in the same boat.
So who's paying for PCB cleanup? So far, the legislature has allocated just $29.5 million towards PCB testing and mitigation. $16 million is going to Burlington School District to help with their $210 million building reconstruction. That leaves just $13.5 million for the remaining 323 schools that could have PCB contamination. And the testing program is set to go until 2027, and Coppolino says they're on the track to meet that deadline, staying consistent with around 20 schools being tested per quarter. Now, school construction is an ongoing conversation in the legislature, too. There are some lawmakers that are looking to pause this program, saying it could be a problem to spend so much money on PCBs now, only to spend even more money on reconstruction in a few years. At the same time, the School Construction Aid Task Force, we know that there are some legislators that are looking to see how PCB and construction funding can work in tandem. Live in Burlington, Melissa Cooney, Channel 3 This Morning.